The streets of Granada were boiling with anger and hatred. The year was 1066, and the city was about to witness a tragedy that would shock the entire region. Joseph, the first minister of Granada and a prominent Jewish leader, was at the center of the storm. His father, Samuel ibn Naghrila, had built a powerful and influential position for their family, but Joseph's fate would be far different. Joseph had married the daughter of a famous rabbi from Kairouan in Tunisia, a marriage that symbolized the close ties between Jewish communities across the Mediterranean. But his success and influence had made him enemies. One of the most dangerous was Abu Ishaq, a respected Muslim scholar and faqih. Abu Ishaq believed that Jews should not hold power over Muslims, and he was determined to bring Joseph down. Abu Ishaq's message spread like wildfire. He wrote a poem that was both powerful and venomous, aimed directly at the ruler of Granada, baddies. The poem accused the Jews of monopolizing power and wealth, and it called for their destruction. Here are some lines from that poem. I myself arrived in Granada and saw that these Jews were meddling in its affairs. They had already divided up the city and its provinces among themselves, and one of these cursed ones is in every place. They collect its taxes, they eat in the enjoyment of a plentiful life, and they crunch with their teeth. They don on the highest-ranking robes while you, O Muslims, are dressed in their cast-off clothes. They are entrusted with your secrets of state, yet how can traitors be trusted? Were I to say, regarding their wealth, O baddies, that it is like your wealth, I would say the truth. So hasten to slaughter them as a good work whereby you will earn God's favor, and offer them up in sacrifice, a well-fattened ram. The poem's words were like a match set to dry kindling. The people of Granada, already simmering with discontent, were quick to respond. A mob formed, and they stormed the Jewish quarter. Joseph, despite his high rank, was no match for the angry crowd. He was captured and brutally killed, along with many other Jews in the city. This event, though shocking, was not the end of the story. The 11th century was a time of both prosperity and upheaval for Spanish Jewry. Despite the violence, many Jewish communities continued to thrive. They were not only successful in business and politics, but also in culture and learning. One of the most prominent figures of this period was Solomon ibn Gabirol, a poet and philosopher who died in his early 30s around 1055. His work, The Fountain of Life, became influential in Europe, and his poetry was celebrated for its beauty and depth. Solomon's first patron was Yaqutl ibn Hassan, a high-ranking Jewish official in Zaragoza. When Yaqutl was executed in a court intrigue in 1039, Solomon found a new patron in none other than Samuel ibn Naghrila, the father of the same Joseph, who would later be killed. Samuel was a powerful figure in Granada, and he supported Solomon's work, even commissioning a panegyric that praised his own wisdom and influence. The political landscape of Spain was also changing. The once mighty caliphate of Cordoba had fragmented into smaller states, known as taifas. These states often competed for power and wealth, and they were not above seeking help from their Christian neighbors. The Christian rulers, in turn, saw an opportunity to profit from this chaos. They began to demand annual tributes, called parias, from the taifa rulers in exchange for military protection. One of the most skilled at this game was Fernando I, the king of León and Castile. By the end of his reign in 1065, he was receiving tributes from the taifas of Zaragoza, Toledo, and Badajoz. The gold from these tributes flowed into the Christian kingdoms, enriching not only the kings but also their nobles, soldiers, and merchants. This wealth attracted adventurers from across the Pyrenees, who brought new ideas and assumptions with them. The competition for tributes was fierce. For example, the Taifa of Zaragoza, strategically located on the Ebro River, was a coveted prize. In 1069, the king of Navarre, Sancho IV, signed a treaty with the ruler of Zaragoza, al-Muqtadir Billah. The treaty required Zaragoza to pay 1,000 gold pieces every month, with an advance payment of 5,000 pieces. This arrangement was a clear example of the protection racket that had developed between Christian and Muslim rulers. The king of Granada, Abd Allah, also had to navigate this complex web of alliances and tribute. In about 1075, he met with Alfonso VI, the son of Fernando I, to negotiate the terms of his tribute. Abd Allah described the negotiations vividly in his memoirs. I prepared to meet the king and gathered around me those of my men whom I could trust. I met him near Granada and showed him every respect. He received me with a cheerful countenance and promised to protect me. Then the negotiations began, and envoys plied back and forth. Alfonso demanded 50,000 gold pieces. I pointed out that the country's resources were meager and that I could not possibly afford to pay that amount. I argued that it would weaken me and make me easy prey for my enemies. After much effort, Alfonso accepted my plea and agreed to 25,000 pieces. I then increased the amount by 5,000 pieces, bringing the total to 30,000, and presented him with a large number of carpets, garments, and vessels. The 11th century was a time of opportunity for ambitious individuals, regardless of their background. Samuel ibn Naghrila, a refugee from Cordoba, became a powerful figure in Granada. Similarly, Ibn Amr, a poet from the tiny Taifa state of Silves, rose to prominence in the court of Seville. His career was marked by dramatic highs and lows, including a period of exile in Zaragoza and a brief stint as the ruler of Murcia. His life ended tragically when he was captured, sold to his old friend and patron Al-Mu'tamid, and executed in Seville. On the Christian side, Rodrigo Diaz, known as El Cid, was another remarkable figure. Exiled from Castile in 1081, he served the ruler of Zaragoza, using his military skills to defeat both Christian and Muslim enemies. His victories, especially the capture of the Count of Barcelona in 1082 and the King of Aragon in 1084, made him rich and famous. The world of 11th century Spain was a complex and often dangerous one, where alliances could shift at a moment's notice, and where the line between friend and foe was often blurred. Despite the challenges, it was a time of great cultural and economic vitality, and the stories of its key figures continue to captivate and inspire. In 1086, Rodrigo, a famous warrior, made peace with Alfonso VI, the King of Castile. However, their relationship soon soured again, and in 1089, Rodrigo left Castile for good. This time, he became a mercenary, commanding his own private army. Rodrigo was skilled and wealthy, and he could gather enough soldiers to fight for him. Over the next 10 years, he roamed eastern Spain, known as the Levante, fighting both Christians and Muslim. Sometimes he battled the Count of Barcelona, and other times he fought against the rulers of small Muslim kingdoms called Taifas. Rodrigo was independent and powerful, and he eventually captured the city of Valencia. He ruled Valencia for the last 5 years of his life, until he died peacefully in 1099. During this time, the region of Al-Andalus, which was the Muslim part of Spain, was going through a period of chaos. The once powerful caliphate had collapsed, and the land was divided into many small kingdoms, or taifas. Some of these changes were positive, like the creation of beautiful art and literature. However, there were also negative consequences, such as constant fighting among the taifas and their vulnerability to being controlled by Christian neighbors. One of the most significant changes was the loss of Al-Andalus's influence over the Maghreb, which is the region of North Africa. In the past, the caliphs of Cordoba had kept a close eye on North Africa to prevent any problems. But with the collapse of the caliphate, the taifas couldn't present a united front. For example, the Taifa of Seville, which was one of the most powerful, could have played a leading role in North Africa, but it didn't. There's a story about Al-Mu'tamid, the ruler of Seville, that shows how little attention the taifas paid to North Africa. In the mid-1060s, a minister told Al-Mu'tamid that a Berber tribe in southern Morocco had built a new city called Marrakesh. The minister thought it was a trivial matter, but Al-Mu'tamid was worried. He predicted that these people would one day come to Al-Andalus and ordered the fortification of Gibraltar to prepare for an invasion. Al-Mu'tamid's prediction came true. The people from Marrakesh, known as the Almoravids, did invade Al-Andalus. They came as allies to the Taifa rulers but quickly turned against them, taking control of all of Al-Andalus. The Almoravids were strict followers of Islam and saw the Taifa rulers as corrupt. They believed that the Taifa rulers had strayed from true Islamic practices, such as paying tribute to Christian kings and allowing Jews to hold high positions in government. The Almoravids also disapproved of the luxurious and hedonistic lifestyle of the Taifa courts, where poetry, wine, and song were celebrated. The Almoravids were successful at first, but they eventually became soft and corrupt, just like the Taifa rulers they had replaced. They were defeated by the Christian kingdoms of León-Castile Aragon-Catalonia, and Portugal. Meanwhile, a new group called the Almohads, who were also strict followers of Islam, rose to power in Morocco. The Almohads conquered Morocco, and then crossed the Strait of Gibraltar to take control of Al-Andalus. They ruled for a while, but they too were eventually defeated by the Christians at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa in 1212. Over the next few decades, the Christians conquered most of Al-Andalus, including the cities of Cordoba, Valencia, and Seville. To understand why the Almoravids and Almohads rose and fell, we can look at the theory of the Tunisian scholar Ibn Khaldun. He believed that the harsh environment of southern Morocco made the Berber people strong and united. When a religious leader like Ibn Yassin came to teach them, they became even more united and powerful. They then conquered their neighbors, but their success also led to their downfall. The softer and more luxurious environment of Al-Andalus made them less strict and less united, and they eventually lost their power. Ibn Yassin's mission began in the mid-11th century, when he tried to teach the Sanhaja Berbers about Islam. At first, they rejected him, but he founded a religious community called a ribat, which was like a monastery for Muslims. The ribat was a place where people lived a strict and disciplined life, and spread Islam through preaching and good deeds. Over time, the Almoravids grew in power and conquered the Sanhaja tribes. They then moved north, establishing a base in Marrakesh. From there, they expanded their control over all of Morocco. When the Almoravids reached the Mediterranean, they came into contact with the Taifur rulers of Al-Andalus. The Almoravids were very different from the Taifur rulers. They were simple, strict, and religious, while the Taifur rulers were sophisticated, cultured, and often lax in their religious practices. The Almoravids saw it as their duty to correct the Taifur rulers and bring them back to the true path of Islam. They criticized the Taifur rulers for not recognizing the authority of the caliph in Baghdad, for paying tribute to Christian kings, and for allowing Jews to hold high positions in government. They also disapproved of the use of astrology and the hedonistic lifestyle of the Taifa courts. In the end, the Almoravids and later the Almohads changed the course of history in Al-Andalus, but their strict and puritanical rule eventually gave way to the more tolerant and powerful Christian kingdoms of Spain. The relationship between the Christian kingdoms and the Muslim Taifa states in the Iberian Peninsula was complex and often fraught with tension. The Christian kings, like Fernando I of León-Castile, would often receive tributes from the Taifur rulers, which helped maintain a fragile peace. However, this arrangement was not stable and could easily turn into outright conquest. Fernando I, for example, didn't just collect gold. He also took slaves, horses, and land to satisfy his vassals, who were powerful and demanding. In 1055, Fernando conquered the cities of Lamigo and Viseu in Portugal, and the Moorish inhabitants were sold into slavery. In 1064, he took Coimbra, forcing the Moors out and giving the city to one of his vassals, who received large tracts of land nearby. In 1065, Fernando set his sights on Valencia, but his death and a dispute over the throne prevented him from achieving his goal. Alfonso VI, one of Fernando's sons, eventually emerged as the ruler. He is best known for conquering Toledo in 1085. The last Taifur ruler of Toledo, Al-Qadir, was weak, and Alfonso, as his protector, had to intervene to support him. This intervention turned into a full-scale takeover. Toledo, being the ancient capital of the Visigothic kings, was a significant prize, and Alfonso couldn't resist the opportunity to take it for himself. This move showed how easily the role of protector could evolve into that of conqueror. The fall of Toledo alarmed the remaining Taifur rulers, who feared the Christian expansion. They turned to the Almoravids, a powerful Berber dynasty from North Africa, for help. Al-Mu'tamid of Seville, a prominent Taifur ruler, famously said he would rather be a camel driver in Morocco than a swineherd in Castile, highlighting the desperate situation. In 1086, the Almoravid leader Yusuf crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and defeated Alfonso VI at the Battle of Segrajas. Despite their initial cooperation, the relationship between the Taifur rulers and the Almoravids was strained. The Almoravids, being strict and fundamentalist, looked down on the Taifur rulers, whom they considered weak and corrupt. In 1090, Yusuf began to dethrone the Taifur rulers, starting with Abd Allah of Granada and his brother Tamim of Malaga. Al-Mu'tamid of Seville was next, and he was exiled to Morocco, where he wrote moving poems about his fall from power. The Almoravids continued their conquest, taking over Badajoz in 1094 and Valencia in 1102. They also captured Zaragoza in 1110, but they never managed to retake Toledo. The Almoravids' presence in Spain changed the dynamics between Muslims and Christians. They were more aggressive and intolerant, often persecuting Christians and Jews. For example, a church in Granada was destroyed in 1099, and a bishop in Malaga was imprisoned for 7 years. The Almoravids' aggressive stance helped fuel anti-Islamic sentiment among the Christian kingdoms. The Christian kings, who had relied on tributes from the Taifa states, now faced financial crises. Alfonso VI's loss of income from tributes affected his ability to govern, and his daughter Urraca, who ruled from 1109 to 1126, struggled to maintain control. The financial impact of the Almoravids' actions was not limited to Spain. The French monastery of Cluny, which had received significant donations from Alfonso VI, also suffered. Alfonso's father, Fernando I, had agreed to pay Cluny 1,000 gold pieces annually, and Alfonso doubled this amount to 2,000 gold pieces in 1077. This money funded the construction of the Abbey Church of Cluny, the largest building in Europe at the time. When the Almoravids cut off the supply of gold, Cluny's finances were severely affected, and it took half a century to recover. Alfonso VI's ties to Cluny were deep. He married Constance, a Burgundian noblewoman and niece of the abbot of Cluny, Hugh. After the Battle of Segrages, Alfonso sought help from French nobles, many of whom were connected to Cluny. One of these nobles, Raymond, married Alfonso's daughter Urraca, and was given the county of Galicia. Another, Henry, received the county of Portugal, and his son would later become the first king of an independent Portugal. The French nobles who came to Spain were driven by a mix of adventure and the desire for wealth. They were inspired by epic tales of Charlemagne's campaigns in Spain, and many saw fighting the Moors as a path to glory. One such noble, Rotrou, fought for the king of Aragon, and was appointed governor of Tudela after its conquest. Other nobles, like Gaston of Béarn and Senchelot of Bigorra, also served in the region and governed cities like Zaragoza and Tarazona. The coming of the Almoravids marked a significant shift in the balance of power in the Iberian Peninsula. It led to the reunification of Al-Andalus under a more aggressive and intolerant Islamic rule, which in turn fueled Christian resistance and the eventual expansion of the Christian kingdoms. The financial and political impacts of these changes were felt for generations, shaping the future of both the Christian and Muslim worlds in Spain. In the world of the medieval aristocracy, religion and warfare were deeply intertwined. Nobles often went on pilgrimages, traveling to holy sites to show their devotion. One of the most famous destinations was the tomb of St. James in Santiago de Compostela, in northwestern Spain. This shrine attracted many people, helping to spread awareness of the opportunities in Spain. Warfare, especially holy war, was also a significant part of their lives. The idea of fighting for religious reasons was not new, but in the 11th century it gained new strength. The Christian Church began to see war against non-Christians as a way to earn spiritual merit. This idea eventually led to the concept of the Crusade. In 1095, Pope Urban II, a French nobleman and former monk, called for the First Crusade at a meeting in Clermont, France. Many French nobles, like Count Rotrou of Perche and Count Gaston of Béarn, answered the call and joined the expedition. They eventually captured Jerusalem in 1099. One of the key figures in this era was Bernard of Toledo, a French nobleman and former monk. He was a strong and confident leader who took over the main mosque in Toledo after the city was conquered by Alfonso VI and converted it into a cathedral. He did the same with mosques in nearby villages. Bernard was a key figure in the church reform movement, which aimed to purify the church and reduce its ties to the secular world. He brought in like-minded clergy from France and placed them in influential positions in the Spanish church. This helped strengthen the connection between the Spanish church and Rome. The reform movement also encouraged the idea of crusades. The church wanted to direct the violent tendencies of the nobility into holy wars. This was part of a broader effort to create a more Christian society, where the clergy would guide the laity in performing godly tasks. During the first half of the 12th century, the relationship between Christians and Muslims in Spain changed. Both sides became more aggressive. The arrival of the Almoravids, a North African Berber dynasty, played a significant role in this shift. The Almoravids were initially seen as deliverers, but soon acted like conquerors. They were not well liked by the local population and faced resistance. Despite the growing tensions, there were still instances of cooperation between Christians and Muslims. For example, Saif al-Dawla, a Muslim prince, became a vassal of the Christian king Alfonso VII of León-Castile. He fought alongside the king against the Almoravids, and even attended the king's imperial coronation. However, his loyalty was tested when he tried to establish his own principality. He was eventually killed by the king's emissaries, though the king denied involvement. On the other side, Reverter, a Catalan baron, was captured by the Almoravids and joined their military. He fought against the Almohads, another Berber dynasty, and died in Morocco. His son Berenguer later returned to Spain and served the Christian king, even lending money to the government. These examples show that the lines between Christians and Muslims were not always clear-cut. The Almoravids' rule in Spain was marked by corruption and alienation of the local population. They were seen as an illiterate military caste that controlled but did not integrate with the native society. Their hold on Spain began to weaken in the early 12th century, and rebellions broke out. Simultaneously, a new threat emerged in Morocco, the Almohads. Their leader, Muhammad ibn Tumart, was a religious reformer who sought to purify Islam and return it to strict orthodoxy. He founded a community in Tinmul and was proclaimed the Mahdi, a divinely guided leader. His movement spread quickly, and he set up a new state in southern Morocco. After his death in 1130, his successor, Abd al-Mumin, expanded Almohad power throughout the Maghreb and into Spain. The Almoravids' rule in Spain was further destabilized by the need to fight the Almohads. In 1143, after the death of the Almoravid leader Ali ibn Yusuf, widespread rebellions broke out in Al-Andalus. Local statelets emerged, and the region fell into chaos, much like it had in the early 11th century. The Almohads eventually took control, marking a new chapter in the history of Islamic Spain. The story of the Iberian Peninsula in the 12th and 13th centuries is a tale of shifting powers and dramatic battles. In the southwest, a mystic named Ibn Cassi founded a sect called the Al-Muridin, or the Adept, centered at a ribat in Silves. The Almoravids, a powerful Muslim dynasty, tried to crush this sect but failed. In 1144, revolts against the Almoravids spread across the Algarve. Ibn Cassi, seeing an opportunity, called for help from the Almohads, a new and rising power. The Almohads arrived in 1146, helped Ibn Cassi capture Seville, but soon turned against him. Ibn Cassi was forced to retreat to Silves, where he was assassinated in 1151. The Almohads then took control of the Algarve. In eastern Spain, the story was different. After the death of Saif al-Dawla in 1146, an adventurer named Muhammad ibn Mard seized power in Murcia and Valencia. Known to the Christians as King Wolf, he was a clever ruler who made deals with the kings of Castile and Aragon to keep the Almohads at bay. He spoke Romance, dressed like a Westerner, and maintained his independent principality until his death in 1172. For over a quarter of a century, he held back the Almohad advance. The Christian powers, sensing the chaos in Al-Andalus, took advantage of the situation. Alfonso VII of Castile, a grandson of the conqueror of Toledo, launched raids deep into the south. In 1146, he even managed to capture Cordoba, but the city was soon retaken by the Almohads. In 1147, Alfonso VII, with the help of Geno's ships, conquered the port of Almeria, giving Castile its first foothold on the Mediterranean. However, both Cordoba and Almeria were eventually lost to the Almohads. Meanwhile, in the west, a significant event was unfolding. Count Henry of Portugal and his wife, Teresa, had a son, Afonso. Afonso grew up to be a strong leader, and won a decisive victory over the Almoravids in 1139. He declared himself king, and in 1143, secured papal recognition for his independent monarchy. In 1147, Afonso, with the help of English and Flemish ships, besieged and captured Lisbon. The first bishop of Lisbon was an Englishman, Gilbert of Hastings, marking the beginning of a long-lasting friendship between Portugal and England. The early 12th century saw some Christian successes, but the tide began to turn as the Almohads consolidated their power. By 1173, they had taken over most of Al-Andalus, including Granada in 1154 and Almeria in 1157. The Almohads also brought the Balearic Islands under their control in 1203. The high point of Almohad power came in the late 12th century. They recaptured Alcácer du Sal in 1191, defeated Alfonso VIII of Castile at the Battle of Alarcos in 1195, and ravaged the Tagus frontier and the plain of Madrid. These victories were a severe blow to the Christian cause, especially when considered alongside the fall of Jerusalem to Saladin in 1187, and the failure of the Third Crusade to retake it. The Christian powers were often divided, which made it difficult to mount a united defense. Alfonso VII had divided his kingdom between his sons, creating separate kingdoms of León and Castile. This division lasted until 1230. There were also constant conflicts between Navarre, Castile, León, and Portugal. These internal struggles allowed the Almohads to gain the upper hand. However, the tide began to turn again. In 1207, under papal pressure, a general peace was achieved among the Christian powers. Alfonso VIII of Castile, with the support of the Pope and allies from France, Aragon, and Navarre, launched a major campaign in 1212. The Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa was a decisive victory for the Christians. The Almohad Emir Muhammad fled, and his standard was captured and taken to the religious house at Las Hulgas near Burgos, where it still hangs today. In the following decades, the Christian rulers of Aragon, Castile, and Portugal made significant gains. By 1252, nearly all of Al-Andalus was under Christian control. This was not an easy process. There were many challenges and setbacks. However, the morale of the Christian forces grew stronger, especially as the Almohad Empire faced its own internal problems. The original ideals of the Almohads were abandoned, and the regime became a hereditary dynasty. Tribal divisions re-emerged, and the Almohad leadership recruited mercenary troops, which led to higher taxes and increased instability. New enemies also appeared, such as the Banu Marin, a tribe that had never fully submitted to Almohad control. They migrated north, and eventually succeeded the Almohads in Morocco. The Almohad leaders, feeling threatened, fortified their cities, but their efforts were too little too late. Two kings, James I of Aragon and Fernando III of Castile, took full advantage of the Almohad decline. James I expanded Aragon's territory, while Fernando III captured important cities like Cordoba and Seville. Portugal, under Sancho II and his successor Afonso III, completed the conquest of the Algarve, securing the southern and western borders of the kingdom. The story of the Iberian Peninsula in these centuries is one of dramatic change, from the rise and fall of powerful dynasties to the gradual shift of power from Muslim to Christian hands. It is a tale of courage, strategy, and perseverance, and it laid the foundation for the modern nations of Spain and Portugal.